What's up, kinfolk? Welcome to Adapt and Respond with me, RJ Young. If you are new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button and like this video and answer the question in the comments below. Which surprises you most? That Arch Manning is off of the injury report ahead of Texas's top 25 clash against Vanderbilt on Saturday, or perhaps that this is not the Ohio State-Penn State game that we expected it to be in preseason, or that LSU is in absolute shambles going into what is a tremendously important bye week as they get ready to take on Alabama without a head coach, without an athletic director, and without a president. There are interims at all this position, but you get my point. I wanted to do this for a number of reasons, not the least of which is I find all these topics to be interesting. I really haven't touched on them that much, especially later in the week, save the LSU bit, which just was too big and too explosive to not speak about in a segment or something like it. And we kind of covered the basis for that leading up to Scott Woodward and him being neutered by the governor of Louisiana, who can do that in Louisiana and say to the LSU Board of Supervisors, I don't want you to consult this dude. I don't want him involved in the hiring of the most important employee in the state of Louisiana. And that also includes the governor of Louisiana. And while I want to get to this part, before I get too deep into that, which there's a lot to unpack here, I do want to talk a little bit about this Texas Vanderbilt game because it is turning out to be one that can change the fortunes of both of these programs as we get closer to the college football playoff and the seeding coming out. 6-2 Texas can't afford to lose this game. 7-1 Vanderbilt really can't afford to lose this game, although you could see a 10-win SEC team getting into the college football playoff. It's just got to be the right 10 wins. And now that both of these programs are ranked and playing each other, we feel like, yeah, this is something that is going to benefit somebody tremendously and hurt someone tremendously. And we can go through all the ways in which this can impact the SEC here in a bit. But I do want to take an opportunity to remind you that Texas is still a favorite in this game. According to my bookie, they're a 2.5-point favorite. And if you feel good about Vanderbilt covering that 2.5 points, perhaps you want to use my bookie to place a wager. And if you do, use the promo code that is my name, RJ Young, all one word, and you can bet the line, you can bet the spread, you can do player props, and they'll cover your first $500. And if you miss, you can use your bet back bonus token and play again. Again, promo code is in the description. Go to my bookie, use it, RJ Young, all caps, all one word. That said, I got to feel good about what Vanderbilt has been able to do as a football program. While the big overarching story is Diego Pavia. And I understand why. He is a fiery guy. He is saying things that you would only say if you expect to win the Heisman Trophy, and he does expect to win the Heisman Trophy and expects Vanderbilt to be respected in the SEC, which is a really new reality for the SEC and for all of us. Vanderbilt, it got to be an SEC program for so long before kicking in. You know, it's one of the founding members, so they just don't kick it out. Talking about Vanderbilt baseball, we might be talking about something different, but if we talk about Commodore football, it ain't been nothing at all for most of its life. And James Franklin got to Penn State off the strength of turning Vanderbilt into a 9-win program. Clark Lee is set to put this program in position to make the college football playoff with the right wins. I mean, we're still looking at them perhaps going 11-1 with a loss to Alabama, who's still undefeated in SEC play. But the thing about Diego Pavia that I think gets missed is he doesn't play the game like his mentor, Johnny Manziel. He plays the game the way he needs to win it. You'll look at the stats, and they're not explosive and they're not large because they play ball control at Vanderbilt. And that is underrated when people are watching them. They bleed you out offensively. They're stout running the ball, and Pavia makes all the passes he needs to. He completes them at a pretty high clip, but he doesn't need to throw for a lot. Completes 68.8% of his passes, 15 TDs to 5 picks, 213 passing yards per game. Also, their leading rusher with 57 yards on the ground. But they don't need to score a bunch of points. They just do, right? They end up scoring 38. They end up scoring 50 because explosive plays from some of their playmakers turn that into something that looks more like what they did against Utah State, 55-35. But then the games that impress me are the ones they win against, like Missouri, 17-10, or LSU, 31-24, right? And then correcting that mistake when they lost to Georgia State last year, and they beat Georgia State 70-21. Now they're catching a Texas team that feels once again like it's figuring it out. It was the preseason #1 team in the country for a reason. It is one of the most talented programs in the country, and we expected Arch Manning to play quarterback the way that Julian Sayin has been playing quarterback, and it ain't quite gone that way. And they've been in a dogfight ever since they beat Oklahoma. Like, they played their best football all year in the Red River rivalry. And defense was flying around. Arch was playing great. Even got the big rushing game where he got to slide, stand up, and wave goodbye to Sooner fans everywhere as Texas was put away. But then you get an OT against Kentucky in a game that Kentucky should have won if Mark Stoops just kicks the field goal or gives himself an opportunity to win a little bit later. Kentucky is not a great football team. Then you go into overtime against Mississippi State. Down 31-14, you fight all the way back, and Mississippi State left the door open in Starkville, and you walk through it. That's also a game in which Steve Sarkisian said Arch grew up a lot. He threw for 346 in that game. They really needed to depend on his arm because it wasn't until late in the fourth quarter when the rushing attack for Texas started to gain some momentum, which is really the most important part of defending Steve Sarkisian's offense. You can stop the run. You can stop him doing anything he wants because all the other things they want to do, misdirection, window dressing, those sorts of things, they go out the window. They just don't work anymore if you could stop Quintravion Wiesner and CJ Baxter when he's healthy. Then you don't have to worry so much, although you do have to worry about DeAndre Moore, about Ryan Wingo, even Parker Livingston, jack injuries. That offense gets to rolling. They've also got a defense that when it is playing its best football can be one of the best defenses in the country with Anthony Hill, who I think is their best player. I don't care what you tell me about Colin Simmons. He's 1B. But you know what? If you want to make Colin Simmons 1A, I'll take Anthony Hill, right? We can do that. Michael Taft is not going to be ready for this game and play in this game, which is also tremendous and big. That's an All-American safety that you don't have there. And while they've been getting outstanding play from cornerback Grayson Littleton, I just don't see you wanting to test those cornerbacks as often as others have when you're a run and time of possession kind of football team the way that Vanderbilt is. What's interesting about going into Saturday's game is Arch Manning's not on the injury report. The injury report has been manipulated by some coaches. We're beginning to see some coaches might list a guy as probable and won't play him, or list a guy as questionable and then he'll be the starter. Until there are real penalties for incorrectly listing a player on the injury report, it just doesn't carry any weight. Big Ten got ahead of this a few weeks ago when running back was listed as questionable and then out and then ended up playing in the game. The reason we put these things together is so everybody knows what you got to work with, and because we're betting on the games. And by we, I mean the public. The American public is betting on the game. And if you are going to attack the integrity of the game, we're going to have a whole problem here. Just can't have that. Now, as I see it, the more talented quarterback is at Texas. The quarterback that probably has the winning time gene, the clutch gene, is at Vanderbilt. And if it comes down to a one-possession game, we know that Diego Pavia can go get you a W. So if you are Texas, you need to get on top of Vanderbilt very quickly. And frankly, that's what you do against a program like this one that wants to control the ball, that wants to run the ball, that wants to limit not just your possessions, but your time of possession. Because if you can go up 2 scores against them and force them to play with some tempo, you're going to have a real opportunity to force them to play the kind of football they don't want to play. And anytime somebody's got to play their second best football, you have an opportunity to continue to play your best football. The takeaway defense that Texas wants to get the ball back to the offense so they can be explosive and try to put up points quickly and in a hurry. And you saw Ryan Wingo could do that for them. You've seen DeAndre Moore can do that for them. You've seen running backs can be home run hitters and then backbreakers. And then you got a quarterback like Arch who's got all the tools there. I don't know that Arch Manning playing this game swings it to Texas in this way, but I do know that it makes it a much more even game than what we might expect if he didn't play. And that might be enough, right? You might have him to make some plays, to make some throws that, frankly, Matthew Caldwell can't make. I know he threw the TD pass to win it, but for me, I'd much rather have the guy wearing 16 on offense than Matthew Caldwell at quarterback for a reason. All right. The other topic that I want to talk about tonight, I think is a little bit further afield, but go with me here. I wrote this piece for foxsports.com where I was asked to take into account some things about what has happened with LSU, what's happened with like the dozen FBS coaches that have been fired before Halloween, including Billy Napier at Florida, James Franklin at Penn State, who Ohio State is going to play Saturday, and of course, Brian Kelly at LSU. And originally the thought was, I'm going to write about why I believe Ohio State is the best head coaching job in America. But as that was becoming more commonplace everywhere else, I don't like to go with the trendy topic unless I have no choice, and I almost always have a choice. And I never want to give the audience something that is obvious, something they could probably see themselves. But this time I got to look to thinking about it, and I would say, what if you don't try to build what Indiana has built? What if you don't try to, play the lottery with donor money, hit reset, and go find a Curt Cignetti, which I feel, and I wrote this in the piece, is a lot like trying to hit a bullet with a bullet from 1,000 yards away. You might do it one time, but it's not really good policy for you to continue to keep trying to do that as a means of success. Your rate is just not going to be that good. But I also need to take into account, or you need to take into account, it took Indiana more than 100 years to get good. More than 100 years. This is the losingest program in FBS history, period. They still are. Even with Curt Cignetti being undefeated this season and being a two-loss team last year. They're new money. And that's not a put down. That is to say, you would not be able to sustain that if it's not him. And think about what Indiana had to go through to get to Curt Cignetti. Then you think about what Colorado did, which was hire a guy that can get them a profile raised high enough to get them to the Big 12. That's what's missed about Deion Sanders and the hire at Colorado. Many people believe that he was hired to win games there. Yes, he was. He was hired to win games there. But the reason that Rick George wanted to do it when he did is because the Pac-12 was dissolving. And Colorado could very much end up on the floor because the football program that ain't been any good since about 2016. And that's not good enough to keep you in a Power 4 when it's shrinking from a Power 5. So you bring in a guy like Deion Sanders that can guarantee marketing, that can guarantee your name is around, and that can guarantee you can sell to television networks. And that is what gets you into a power conference. You have an audience and a base that wants to watch you and watch you on TV. This is why my alma mater, the University of Tulsa, is not a Power 4 school, right? And I'm going to pick on the University of Tulsa because it's my school. It's my alma mater, not because it's the smallest Division I program playing football, which it has been and it is. But it's also got like 4 times as many Pro Football Hall of Famers as Clemson. It just means a lot to have a football team at TU when you go through it. I mean, you think about some of the guys that come through there and you'd be shocked to know, Zaven Collins, Tyler Smith, my buddy Jerry Ostrowski, Drew Pearson, Glenn Dobbs, and keep going, right? Steve Largent. There's a long list there. It's just sustaining that over time means you got to have a lot of people that watch TU football. And had Deion Sanders been the head coach at at TU, you might have that. That's the reason I think that is to go. You also can't really do it the way that Oregon has done it, which is to have a big money donor that is willing to throw money at Mark Helfrich, at Chip Kelly, at Mario Cristobal, and at Dan Lanning, and make sure that you are always flush with enough cash to go be competitive and good and hopefully win the program's first national title. The smart thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. It is to build a program the way that Ohio State has. It's doing the numbers on this. Because I did a segment earlier where I was kind of getting at this, but this time I wrote it down and I got to see. So the number of games, or since Ohio State has started playing 10-game seasons, it has won 7 or fewer games in a season just a handful of times. I mean, first year with Woody Hayes, the last year with Woody Hayes, the last year with Earl Bruce, the last year with John Cooper. You got the Luke Fickell year, which you kind of sort of count, but not really because you don't get the national championship for the 12-0 season that Urban Meyer had. And that's it. That's it. That's it. That's all we're talking about. Usually when you go under that 8-win threshold at Ohio State, you get your walking papers. But that's because the machine at Columbus works. It was built to work. It has always been built to work. And one of the things that I admire about Ohio State is many would say it's the best roster money can buy the last 2 years. Without taking into account, it really is going up the rough side of the mountain the way that they did this at Ohio State, because you got to remember, Ryan Day still hasn't beaten Michigan since 2019. You also have to remember they didn't get to play for the Big Ten championship in 2023, 2024, 2022, 2021 because they kept losing to Michigan, right? You also need to take into account that the Big Ten West was, when it was still the Big Ten West, was wildly light, right? We're talking about Iowa, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Purdue, all making the Big Ten championship game when Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State are all in the same division together. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense, even when it was East and West, let alone leaders and legends, which I thought was preposterous. But alongside that, take it into account what they were willing to do to try to get what they needed to win the national championship, which is if there's a market inefficiency to exploit, they're going to exploit it. I say this in a number of reasons. Like when people are saying, hey, I don't want to pay these athletes all this money. I don't like the way that college football is going with name, image, and likeness. Ohio State created not one, but two collectives, and said, is that all? Cool. And they're able to pay the guys that wanted to be Buckeyes and came back rather than go to the NFL. And they're able to add really important and one-time talent in Quinshon Judkins, in Will Howard, in Caleb Downs, and even Julian Sayin, who's contributing this year, Jeremiah Smith, all these to get them the 2024 national championship, even as they lost to Oregon and lost to Michigan and need to run the table to win the championship. It's not an easy thing to do, and it takes a lot of guts to keep sticking with Ryan Day, to keep sticking with that staff, to keep sticking with Jim Knowles, whose 3-year defense came in, and then Penn State tried to run the recipe back, but without the 3 years that Jim Knowles' defense needs to kick in because they thought that the 4-2-5 they were running is going to be, just fine, just good. We got great players. That's not how it worked at Ohio State. Didn't expect it to work like that at Penn State. Now James Franklin ain't got a job because, well, they tried to run back the blueprint that they saw Ohio State use last year and not since 2021. Okay? There's that. I'd also add to this discussion, historically, Ohio State has exploited a market inefficiency. One of the reasons that I enjoy talking about the Buckeyes is because, I'm going to do the thing where I talk about black folks. Feel free to let it go or pack a lunch. Before integration, which is about 1970, we're talking about Ohio State recruiting black players to play there because they're good. Like Big Bill Bell comes to mind, defensive end, All-American, 1930s. Rudy Hubbard got to be the head coach at FAMU, was running backs coach for Woody Hayes at Ohio State. These things matter to me. The Archie Griffin, these things matter to me. Representation matters to me. Okay? So many times I get are you an Ohio State fan? Nah, respect. Respect. That's what I respect good. I respect winning. I respect, hey, if you're a mean cuss, be the same mean cuss with everybody you meet, which gives me the segue that I need to get to LSU. Okay? LSU has always been really important in Louisiana, but you don't know LSU as being good at football until Nick Saban got there. You can go historically and you can look around and you can see, they had ups and downs. They had players here and there. But aside from Huey Long coming on the field to call plays, having all these things, he was governor of Louisiana, do a little homework, do a little research. Also a wildly influential figure, not just in Louisiana politics, but in American politics. Huge LSU fan, and also had lots of things to say about who the head coach should be or not be, and that is kept up. That is every governor in the state of Louisiana has a vested interest in LSU football and will put their finger on the scale. They will do that. But I say that to say, when Nick Saban came to LSU to be, I think at the time, the highest paid college football coach in America, Mark Emmert was the head chancellor at LSU, who went on to be president of NCAA and was president at Washington, University of Washington. And when they brought Nick Saban in, he looked around and didn't see none of us with melanin in the skin, or enough of us with melanin in our skin, and said, hey, where are all the other players at? And they said to him, they don't go here. And he said, BS, they don't go here. And he went recruiting the state of Louisiana, which if you just take a look at it and you look at John Curtis, you look at Edna Kerr, you look at Evangel, like you throw a rock, you hit an outstanding football player in the state of Louisiana, man. I could start with the Mannings. I could go to Marshall Faulk. I could go to Mark Spears. John David Booty. My goodness, dude. Keep going down the list. There's a big, long list of great Louisiana football players. Leonard Fournette ends up going to LSU. But he's the guy that turned LSU into the winner that you know, Nick Saban, by just recruiting the state and saying, this is what we're going to be about. We're going to be about winning. I don't care about the rest. I care about winning. And when you care about winning the way that LSU and Ohio State, LSU did and Ohio State does, you can do some great things. You just got to be willing to risk everything else. My favorite part of this story, college football, when we talk about blue bloods, when we talk about the hitters, when we talk about the teams that everybody thinks is going to win, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, when Dabo Swinney had the thing rolling. It ain't what you want. It's what you're willing to sacrifice to get it. That is the definition of single-minded focus. That's what it means. It means everything else goes by the wayside. Some of my favorite and smartest football people in the world don't know who owns their mortgage. Could not tell you how their amortization schedule works. Don't know where the light bill gets paid or how the electricity turns on. When they start a car, they know that it runs on something called gasoline. You're giving up a lot here. And because you've chosen something that we all hold dear, college football, we let slide that you might not be the best human being. We let slide that you might not be the best father. You might not be the best citizen. You can't tell me who your state representative is or your congressman is. We let all that go because you're good at this other thing, this one thing. But when you're no longer good at that one thing, what else do you have, right? That is the sacrifice. You're going to have to figure it out after you're no longer the 1% of this. That happens at Ohio State. That happens at LSU. That happens at Texas. That happens at Oklahoma. It happens in other programs, which is why you hear about how guys either get taken care of or don't, right? They go into insurance or air conditioning sales. They get all of a sudden very interested in HVACs and car dealerships because your name still carries weight, even if the skills to run those businesses aren't skills you have. You could probably hire somebody is what you think. But it takes a little bit more. It takes a little bit more than that. It takes some investment. It takes saving some money. It means that you need to be financially, fiscally aware and frugal, which is a great way to be as a person. But at LSU football, that's going to be hard, dog. So when I got Jeff Landry out here, who was blaming Scott Woodward for everything but the Old Testament floods and the plague of locusts, I said, yo, you want to pay less than what Brian Kelly was getting paid to coach LSU? How do you expect to get the coach that LSU wants if you're going to pay less than the market? Because the market right now is between 8 and 10 for the caliber of coach that you want at LSU. Why is that the caliber of coach you want? Because Lane Kiffin's at Ole Miss. He's going to get a raise. SMU gave Rhett Lashley a 7-year extension. Matt Rule got a 2-year extension. You've got athletic directors coming out the woodwork to say, I'm not going to LSU on the tweets. That's how big it is. And also, Florida is willing to pay competitively. Penn State is willing to pay competitively. And that's just the bigger programs with the bigger profiles. Who's to say there isn't someone at Virginia Tech that's willing to play an arm and a leg to get one of these coaches? I mean, yes, we've all seen the rumors about James Franklin perhaps being a guy that could be there. But that's what they are right now. They're just rumors. Meanwhile, I think, Brian Kelly would fit right in Oklahoma State. I don't mind saying it. There's going to be probably close to 40 jobs that open up this year because everybody was first getting used to the revenue sharing and, front loading the NIL payments, trying to figure out what the budget was going to be. But now you got to make the college football playoff, and you got to make the college football playoff at a time when Indiana and Vanderbilt are messing up what is traditionally a spot for Florida, for LSU, for Michigan, for Iowa. Right? Minnesota is actually more of a blue blood than you might expect, right? Michigan State, more of a blue blood than you might expect. USC still not made a college football playoff, but Lincoln Riley's buyout is reportedly close to $90 million. They're just kind of stuck with each other for the time being. And all the while, everybody wants to know who's the next head coach is going to get fired. And y'all want to get in the comments asking me about when it is that Brent Venables is going to get gone. I'm going, the problem that you run into is two things. One, I like Brent Venables. Two, who are you going to get this better? Like, this is why I was mad about James Franklin getting fired. Yeah, his record sucks against top 10 teams. Absolute garbage. But who are you going to get this better? I mean, honestly, like I'm asking that question. You fight. Billy Napier was hired after they fired a guy who was basically putting up similar numbers and then better numbers than Billy Napier. And now he's at UNLV. So Dan Mullen would be like, yo, what I got to do over here? Not be Urban Meyer? Yeah, nobody's Urban Meyer. He went 83-9 at Ohio State. This guy one of the best winning percentages, I think the best winning percentage of all time. The man did not have a season at Ohio State where he won fewer than 10 games. And even that, we're talking about the headaches on the sideline. It takes a lot. And then think about just how many billionaires live in Highland Park that are ready to give SMU everything they got if it means they're going to be good. Oh yeah, remember A&M? They got a lot of money too. I don't understand why you would not stay the course and try to build this thing the way that Ohio State has. They've had something like 7 head coaches since 1960. Let's see, Woody Hayes, Earl Bruce, John Cooper, Jim Tressel, Luke Fickell, Urban Meyer, Ryan Day. We're counting Luke Fickell, but he had the 1 year, and it was basically on a hold the water sort of basis, right? You're not going to keep this job full time. So that even if you do that, come on now. Keep James Franklin or don't, but who are you going to get that's better? And now Pat Kraft got to go get somebody that's better. And that's what he said. And now the guy that everybody thought was going to go get, Matt Rule, just re-up for 2 years and got a sweetheart deal, right? He gets, I think, an annual raise of $1 million every year they make the college football playoff. Granted, they ain't done that yet, but they're on track to. Are you going to go get Kirk Ferentz? Is that what you want? That's why Iowa ain't ready to move on him. You don't see them getting mad about it. But I get it. You get people that are upset about it. You've got donors that say, I got this money to burn, and I don't have 100 years to watch Indiana get good again. Okay, cool. That's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to be about. I don't see it. You pivot from Lloyd Carter, Rich Rod. That's why you got into a mess, Michigan. You went away from who you are. You went away from what you do. And it took going through Rich Rod and Brady Hoke to get you to Jim Harbaugh, who came out of his good graces to help you. He'd already done this at San Diego. He'd already done this at Stanford. Hell of a coach for the Niners, trying to get it done for Chargers. He wanted to win at Michigan. That's what he came there to do. And as soon as he got that national championship, peaced out. And you know what? They got it the way they did it. They took no prisoners. Like, I am on them about cheating because they got caught. But also, they did whatever it takes. They were single-minded in what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. And it took him 8 friggin' years. Why do you think you get to cut corners? Because you got a lot of money? No. It's college football. There's at least 40 programs with a lot of money. And now you've got more openings than you have qualified candidates for the job. You know what that's called? It's called a seller's market. That's what we got. That's what we got. Congratulations. We all did this. If you got your head coach and you're looking at going bowling, hold on to that man. If you got your head coach and he's gone 3-9, really ask yourself, what are you going to get that's better? And are you willing to overpay by some margin to get better? Because this is what I don't think Governor Landry understands. We will outbid you. We will outbid you. Money is not the end-all, be-all, but it's one hell of a tiebreaker. All right, that's going to do it for this live episode of Adapt and Respond. If you like the show, tell me about it in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll see y'all on the flip side. Doses.